Okay, hi, I'm Kadenik. Since so many of you asked, here's the breakdown of the knockoff viznode thing. I made this shortly after discovering Everyday on SoundCloud, and less shortly after discovering viznode, so I was feeling very inspired to create short and textural music. I will not be playing back the project in this video for CPU reasons, so for reference, here's what it sounds like. Also, you probably noticed that the project looks different. I just organized it for explanation purposes. So, the most important instrument in this, I think, is the piano. It's a lab soft piano with some OTT pretty much, and also there's a thin micro on it, which is basically free crystallizer that's being automated, and some EQ. And there are also some reverses to make it flow better. Next up, the strings. Also labs. I did this trick I learned from Skybreak, which is to use a mid-side disperser as a way to rebalance the left and right channels, and some typical processing, subtle saturation and soothing. The synths. One of the synths is a sine wave. I used this cool technique to make it more interesting, which is to put a pitch shifter up 1 octave, and immediately after that, a pitch shifter down 1 octave. So it's at the same pitch, but there are now artifacts, which are then being emphasized by this OTT, and to make it a little bit more glitchy, textury, I used Argo Lunar. It does granular things to audio, and that's also the same synth that plays the last notes at the end. Dispersed saw pluck. Square wave twinkle with some thin micro and all pass phase. This is 3x it's a saw wave and a square wave, and I'm using slide notes that are different colors so they can slide differently, and the processing consists of a wave shaper and reverb, basically, and it's being automated a bit. These two are just doing volume automation, and this is an automation in the synth to just slightly change the tone over time. This is a sound paint. It's made of piano bells. Yeah. In the third part, there are some soft melody notes. These are Atmos 2 and echo drops from Fruity LSD, and the echo drops have a dimension expander, reverb, and soothe on them, and a high shelf. There is no bass in the first part, but there is in the second part, and it sounds like this. There's a low cut on it, which is being automated, and in addition to that, there is a mid-side EQ cutting out the side lows, saturation, EQ, OTT, saturation, EQ, all-pass phase, saturation, OTT, and saturation. The next bass is for the pre-hit. It is just a sine wave with the first harmonic, with distortion and filtering on it. The bass in the hit is a Reese made of 3 layers, this Vital preset, which provides the sub bass, and then this other Vital doing mids, low mids, and this GMS Reese crunching up the low mids, and they're all routed to a bus, which has some saturation, EQ, saturation, dimension expander, mid-side EQ to avoid stereo low end, more EQ, and more saturation. Those are all of the bases. Now for the hit. So there's a super saw, very basic. Choir from Fruity LSD. This one note detuned saw in Vital, just because I felt like that chord needed a bit more B natural in it.
I actually think this needs a bit more B natural in this chord.
And an Atmos 2, which has an EQ, OTT, and soothe on it. Very heavy soothe. And the Atmos 2 is routed to the mixer track of the SoundPaint piano that has some OTT on it and balance for volume elimination, which is this sound. Just a normal piano from SoundPaint. And then also this sample. Super saw with a vowel-y EQ shape and OTT on it, a vocoded frequency shifting experiment chord hit, a pad from BandLab that I often use as a chord stack layer, has a lot of OTT on it, chime, a flutter in Vital, which is basically just a super saw with some effects, distortion, compression, and there's an LFO modulating the level and also the distortion, and the LFO's rate is being automated to slow down. Most of the layers for the big chord hit are being routed to this bus, which has OTT, EQ automating the frequency of the low pass and cutting out the low end, reverb, and some soothes. Now for the tonal ambience, of which there is quite a lot. This is a sound design session I did at some point in time. This is the render of a Vital preset that I made. That's one of my pads. This is my signature sound that I use in almost every single song since November of 2019. That is some sample render of a song I started and never finished and never showed to anyone. That's my track, The Weight of the World, put through the blur function in Edison and EQ'd it and granularized it and automated a reverb for this part. I made that for the outro of Springtime and I threw it in there because why not? Some sample that I happen to have, and a pad from Sample Focus. Next, there is Modulated Life sound design session, messing around in Snap Heap. Another one of my pads. Another one of my pads. Another one of my pads. Sticks pad. Elation pad. And some sample from Sample Focus that I thought fit. There's less ambience in the third part because that space is being taken up by the additional synth layers. Pad from Sample Focus. Reversed pluck to layer with the reversed reverb. And a sample I had made previously called Whack Signs in a separate project file that has been processed with Retune and OTT. That's me walking around in some leaves. This is a sample called stretch.wave, which is reversed and stretched even more than it already was. And it also has Argo Lunar on it and some saturation. Sample called Ambient Metal Noises Crystal Squares that I use in a lot of my songs. Kick drum from my random kickback. Very stretched, and actually it's being routed to 2 different mixer tracks. So this one, which is less audible, has a glitch shifter and Argo Lunar on it, and some saturation and EQ and OTT and typical processing stuff. And this second one is routed to the mixer track of this sound, which has frequency shifter, EQ, Argo Lunar, bright ambience, Argo Lunar, soothe, and saturation. I used a lot of stretched granular sounds to try and emulate something that I had heard in Viznode's music, hence the name knockoff Viznode. There is also a water sample. This has a soothe on it, which is in delta mode, so it only lets the loudest frequencies through, and I think that makes it sound more squishy. Some EQ and a frequency shifter. Glitches. Crow impact with a thin micro on it. I'm pretty sure this is a granularized drum loop. This is the Fireplace Vital preset by In The Mix. Background noise from Looperman. Windy ambience. Flurry loop from Sample Focus that has some limiting and EQ and heavy clipping and EQ and soothe and saturation and dimension expander on it. And the second one has basically a ton of soothe and saturation on it and some EQ too. This last wave shaper is being automated. And again, there are not as many atonal textures in the last part because that space is taken up by the other layers, but there is this, which is a sine wave frequency shifted down with the feedback turned up. And this random sample I found somewhere, being low and thundery and wet. And then there are some effects to emphasize the hit, such as this reversed glass sample, white noise riser, reversed effects, ocean waves, big tom, cymbal, impact. This impact has an Argo Lunar on it, and the mix is being automated so that it is granular-y and metallic when it's quiet and solid when it needs to be. And then there's a downlifter too. And a white noise sweep. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the stuff. There is some stuff on the master, which I'll go through real quick. There's a wave shaper doing a very heavy distortion and a bit of a flanger too. Those are being automated, just swelling in at the very end. A soothe, because I had gotten soothe fairly recently and was still in the phase of overusing it. An OTT, because why not? I usually don't like to OTT my master, but it worked fine this time, probably because there weren't any like EDM drums. That I found is the main thing that I don't like what OTT does too. And some limiting. So yeah, that's the thing. Bye.